on a January day in 2020, saw businessman Barry Wolverson, a father of 8, and Gerald Wildman found themselves parked in Madigan's yard, where Wolverson rented space. Just before midday, their world was shattered by a sudden ambush from a gunman. Both Wolverson and Wildman were subjected to multiple gunshot wounds, and although both initially survived, their fates diverged drastically. Wildman, struck in the lower back, managed to make a full recovery. In contrast, Wolverson's luck took a cruel turn. Left in a coma, he clung to life on a ventilator in a residential care facility. Tragically, 13 months later, he succumbed to the ordeal. The perpetrators behind this brutal act were none other than Bernard Fogarty and Robert Rue Redmond, infamous figures in Dublin's gangland. In December 2022, both men were found guilty and subsequently sentenced to life for orchestrating the ruthless shooting. Prior to this crime, Fogarty and Redmond had cultivated a reputation as two of the city's most feared criminals, embroiled in various feuds in the Kulok area. Their involvement in Wolverson's tragedy marked a dark chapter in their criminal pursuits. The two men initially faced charges of attempted murder. However, the tragic death of Barry Wolverson in February 2021 prompted a chilling upgrade to murder charges. Bernard Fogarty, a man with a staggering 55 prior convictions, and his partner in crime Robert Redmond, were not only held accountable for Wolverson's murder, but were also found guilty of assaulting Gerard Wildman, the surviving victim, who, despite being shot, remained silent when questioned by the authorities. Forensic investigators unearthed damning evidence, revealing firearm discharge residue on Redmond's hands and clothing, unequivocally designating him as the actual shooter. CCTV footage played a pivotal role in the case, capturing the duo moving in tandem on the fateful day of the shooting. Painstakingly examining over 1,700 hours of footage, investigators traced Fogarty's steps, highlighting how he acquired 3 fire logs from Circle K petrol station and collected a jerry can from his sister's residence. These items served a sinister purpose, burning out the Citroen C4 in Greenwood Estate moments after the shooting. Intriguingly, the Citroen had been utilized by the perpetrators to access and then exit the yard, a crucial detail on the investigation. One of the purchased fire logs was later discovered in Fogarty's Renault Megane. Fogarty, with the lighter clutched in his hand, was discovered just 300 yards from the still-burning Citroen, a mere half hour after the shooting. Upon his arrest, Gardaí noted a distinct smell of petrol emanating from his tracksuit bottoms. Upon reaching Kulok Garda station, Fogarty's attempt to wash his hands with Link shower gel hinted at a desperate effort to conceal damning evidence. Despite the absence of a recovered firearm and the lack of DNA evidence on bullets found at the crime scene, the convergence of circumstantial evidence formed an unassailable case against both men. The conviction, however, left a lingering mystery, as a clear motive for the crime remained elusive. The intricate tapestry of the investigation showcased the relentless pursuit of justice and the ominous shadow cast by Fogarty and Redmond's dark deeds. Despite facing serious charges and being under investigation, Fogarty continued causing chaos and engaging in violent incidents. In the long run up to the trial in the Wolverson case, he kept threatening people in an attempt to intimidate those who might have interacted with the guards. Wolverson's wife claimed Fogarty had waged a campaign of intimidation against her, threatening her over the phone, smashing up her car, and spray painting her whole door. Early 2023, Bernard Fogarty added another dark chapter to his criminal repertoire, pleading guilty to yet another gangland hit. This time it was the attempted murder of Mark Ivers. The Special Criminal Court wasted no time delivering a 15-year sentence in May of that year for Fogarty, a man already serving time for the brutal murder of Barry Wolverson. The sinister plot unfolded in September 2019 in Donaghmede, just months before the Wolverson-Wildman shooting. Mark Ivers found himself targeted, subjected to a hail of bullets at a house on Streamfield Road, Dublin 13. As dusk settled that evening, Ivers entered the house, only to be confronted by a masked assailant wielding a gun, emerging from a Nissan. The chilling CCTV footage captured Fogarty and the female accomplice disembarking from the car just before it erupted in flames. A rendezvous at a pub, where they were later picked up by an associate in a Mercedes, added another layer of intrigue. Evidence uncovered a flurry of intense communication leading up to the shooting between a phone linked to Fogarty and an associate. The motive crystallized. Ivers had been contacted, lured to the house under the guise of a motorbike arrangement. Miraculously, Mark Ivers survived the ordeal, sustaining gunshot wounds to his leg and abdomen. The incident, a stark reminder of the brazenness of Fogarty's criminal pursuits, played out just across from Donaghy's community school, with students unknowingly practicing inside. Fogarty's guilty plea, a grim admission to his violent actions, resulted in a deduction of 5 years from his already considerable sentence. The relentless cascade of criminal deeds portrayed Fogarty as an unrelenting force, leaving a trail of violence and chaos in his wake. Before being jailed, Fogarty wielded significant influence in Dublin's drug trade. Despite being a prominent figure in the Coolock area, he operated on the fringes, eluding clear association with any specific criminal organization. Alongside Robert Redmond, Fogarty offered his services as ruthless gun for hire. As a notorious gangland enforcer, Fogarty cast a shadow of fear across Dublin's north side, entangled in a web of feuds with rival factions. While they maintained connections with some of Dublin's most dangerous criminals, including members of the Kinahan Cartel, both Fogarty and Redmond operated as freelance agents. In a disturbing twist of events in July 2023, Redmond, grappling with addiction issues, found himself behind bars once again. This time he faced a 6-year sentence for his involvement in transporting a submachine gun, recovered during a Garda operation a couple of years prior. The firearm, discovered in a vehicle stopped by law enforcement, displayed signs of a criminal enterprise, with its serial number deliberately obliterated. Redmond's extensive criminal history, comprising 97 previous convictions, including firearm-related charges, and the life sentence for the Wolverson murder, painted a grim portrait of his involvement in Dublin's underworld. The narrative unveiled the intricate and perilous dance between crime and punishment in the city's criminal landscape. However, Fogarty was not just notorious for his violent acts. He also became infamous for openly threatening his rivals using social media. Engulfed in a series of feuds that served as the fuel for his online posts, Fogarty defied the clandestine approach favored by most criminals in his league. In a stark departure from anonymity, Fogarty brazenly shared videos of himself unmasking his identity as he directly confronted the camera, issuing explicit threats of violence across platforms like YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok. A paradoxical figure, he seemed to derive pleasure from immersing himself in feuds and criminal activities, seemingly oblivious to the inevitable scrutiny from law enforcement. Fogarty's video repertoire showcased him brandishing knives, daring rivals, showcasing wads of €50 notes, and enticing potential informants with rewards for divulging details about his enemies. Reveling in the attention, he actively engaged with comments on his videos, fostering an ominous online presence. The quest for public recognition, though, came at a cost, earning him the scorn of fellow criminals on Dublin's north side, who viewed Fogarty's audacious foray into social media as a dangerous deviation from their clandestine norms. The narrative unfolded as a chilling testament to the intersection of crime and the digital age, with Fogarty embodying the paradoxical blend of audacity and notoriety that left an indelible mark on Dublin's criminal tapestry. In a recent ominous twist of fate, Bernard Fogarty met his demise within the confines of his cell at Portlaoise Prison. Discovered unresponsive, his death is believed to have occurred from natural causes, casting a somber veil over the notorious criminal's final chapter. While not classified as suspicious, investigations are underway by both Gardaí and the Irish Prison Service to scrutinise the circumstances surrounding Fogarty's passing. His death marks the conclusion of one of Ireland's most violent criminals, extinguishing the life of a once feared hitman, who had etched a chilling legacy as one of the city's most notorious assassins. On a chilly Sunday morning in February 2008, a nightclub in West Dublin turned into a spine-chilling horror scene after Irish criminal Wayne McNally clashed with one of the bouncers and shockingly shot him in the face. Surveillance footage from the nightclub showed a young boy standing within just a stone's throw away from McNally as he unleashed his fury. And this was not the first time McNally found himself tangled up in violent skirmishes. Who is this dangerous criminal, and what happened to him? In this video, I'll tell you his story. David Gilsonan, who was working at the door of the Hutch nightclub at the Red Cow Inn in Clondalkin, found himself in the middle of a tense situation involving McNally following an argument which erupted between McNally and another visitor. Sensing trouble, Gilsonan intervened to defuse the conflict. Both McNally and the other individual initially walked away, but McNally returned later, seeking entry to the club to speak with his girlfriend. However, Gilsonan, aware that closing time was imminent, refused McNally entry. Shortly thereafter, chaos ensued. A sudden shout of "Watch your back" was followed by a flash and a gunshot. Gilsonan felt the impact as the bullet tore through his face, leaving him with severe injuries. McNally, then just 23 years old, fled the scene in an Audi, which had been stolen from outside the Square shopping centre in Tallaght. Later that evening, 2 police officers patrolling Dolphin's Barn spotted McNally heading towards the city centre. They instructed him to place his hands behind his back, but McNally resisted. A struggle ensued as McNally sprinted through gardens, dodging clotheslines, and causing one officer to suffer a broken bone in his hand after being struck by a line pulled down by McNally. The other officer caught up and was punched in the face before managing to subdue McNally. Later it was discovered that McNally was running towards the stolen Audi, where the gun, a Glock 9mm used in a nightclub shooting, was left on the front seat. The following year, McNally found himself facing the music at Dublin criminal court. Although he tried to claim his drink had been spiked, hoping for a sympathy card, the judge wasn't buying it, and he was sentenced to 13 years in prison. While serving time for the nightclub incident, McNally earned himself an extra 2 years for a van theft that happened just a month before. By that point, the father of 2 had racked up over 60 convictions, ranging from firearms offences to escaping custody, robbery, and multiple assaults. His turbulent journey began early. He dropped out of school at just 8 years old and spent significant time in institutions before landing in St Patrick's and Mountjoy prisons. His life was marred by heroin addiction from his early teens. McNally came to prominence in 2003 with a brazen carjacking incident outside an apartment block in Harold's Cross, during which he shockingly slashed a woman's neck. As Gardaí raced to catch him, one of his passengers whipped out a shotgun and fired shots on the pursuing Gardaí. This passenger was none other than notorious kingpin Brian King Rat Rattigan, for whose gang McNally acted as enforcer at the time. Sitting alongside McNally and Rattigan was Wayne Zambra, one of Rattigan's youngest and most trusted gang members, who met his tragic end 3 years later. McNally's role as muscle for Brian Rattigan's mob sheds light on his deep involvement in Dublin's underworld. Rattigan gained notoriety as a key player in the intense Crumlin-Drimnagh feud of the early 2000s. The feud escalated after a significant Garda raid at the Holiday Inn on Pierce Street, which exposed a drug operation and led to the arrest of 3 young men. This pivotal event fractured the gang involved, dividing them into 2 rival factions. Brian Rattigan and his brother emerged as the leaders of one group, while Fat Freddie Thompson took charge of the other. Thompson's faction later merged with other criminals from Crumlin to become the primary suppliers for the notorious Kinahan Cartel, operating in Dublin's South Inner City. Years down the line, McNally found himself caught in the crosshairs as a member of Rattigan's inner circle. Despite warnings from law enforcement, McNally faced a harrowing ordeal in 2007 when a lone gunman ambushed him at his girlfriend's doorstep. As McNally opened the front door, a barrage of bullets tore through him, striking his face, legs, arms, and shoulder. Yet McNally miraculously survived the onslaught. Skipping ahead to 2017, after serving his lengthy 13-year sentence, McNally's return to freedom was marred by immediate danger. Just days after his release, he faced a dire warning from the Gardaí about a plot to assassinate him, orchestrated by Daniel Kinahan's gang. In response, McNally wasted no time and bolted to the UK. Despite his unwavering loyalty to Rattigan, McNally understood the lethal capabilities of the Kinahan Cartel, realizing they had the means to put a hefty bounty on his head. Back then, Rattigan was cooling his heels behind bars, leaving McNally in a precarious spot. The heat was on after the Kevin Street Gardaí rolled out Operation Respite, aiming their sights at Rattigan's drug empire in Dublin's South Inner City. While Rattigan's associates operated within the heart of the Kinahan Cartel's territory, his gang extended its reach far beyond Dublin. They were also deeply involved in drug trafficking in areas like Cavan, Kildare and Limerick, where their main drug suppliers were none other than the notorious King Calliope gang. Gardaí feared McNally would step up to run the show for King Rat's crime empire once he was out of prison, but McNally's post-release plans took an unexpected turn. Instead of taking the reins, he opted to hightail it out of Dublin, leaving Rattigan seething with anger as McNally's sudden departure left him in a bind. McNally was one of the few trusted lieutenants who kept things running smoothly for Rattigan behind bars. His absence was a glaring void that Rattigan couldn't fill. To add insult to injury, Rattigan was released from prison in 2021, only to find out that McNally was nowhere to be found when he needed loyal allies by his side. The reason? In 2019, a UK court slammed McNally with not just one, but 2 life sentences, an outcome that sealed McNally's fate and shattered any hope of a reunion with Rattigan on the streets. In a wild and chaotic scene just a year earlier, McNally found himself embroiled in a booze and drug-fueled escapade that turned dangerously violent. On December 22, 2018, McNally had been at the home of a woman where they indulged in a mix of drinks and cocaine while getting into the holiday spirit of wrapping Christmas presents. As the night wore on, another man showed up, joining the festivities of drinking and snorting coke. But what started as a festive gathering soon spiraled into a chilling altercation. The woman lashed out at McNally, stabbing him in the leg over a dispute about cocaine use. In a frantic act of self-defense, McNally retaliated, stabbing the woman with scissors, causing her to bleed profusely and suffer severe injuries, including a fractured cheekbone, eye socket, and cuts and bruises to her face, shoulder, and abdomen. While the other man rushed to her aid, McNally turned on him as well. He viciously stabbed the man in the legs and attempted further strikes at his stomach, missing by mere inches. McNally's fists flew, leaving a gruesome scene with blood spattered across walls and ceilings. According to the judge presiding over the case, McNally's actions were reckless and excessive. He should have recognized that the man posed no ongoing threat, yet McNally continued his brutal assault. In the case of the woman, McNally's appeal on self-defense was accepted, although the judge said it went way beyond what was acceptable. The man's injuries were of the utmost gravity: brain damage, internal bleeding to the brain, and skull fractures, as well as stab wounds. The woman later claimed McNally beat him to a pulp. Doctors said he suffered life-threatening injuries and was lucky to survive. After the incident, McNally took and disposed of the scissors and his clothes to try and cancel any evidence. Nevertheless, after the horrifying attacks, he was arrested at Manchester Airport when he was attempting to flee back to Ireland. In a stern sentencing, the judge deemed McNally a significant danger to the public and handed down life sentences for each grievous bodily harm offence. McNally remained stoic and emotionless as the judge pronounced his fate, a minimum of 10 years to be served behind bars. On a crisp autumn evening in an Inchicore Park, 18-year-old Luke Wilson lay bleeding on the damp grass, his life seeping away with each laboured breath. 3 bullet wounds marred his young body, one in the face, another in the neck, and a third in his arm. The acrid smell of gunpowder lingered in the air, mingling with the metallic scent of blood. As consciousness faded, Luke's mind raced. But death, it seemed, was not ready for Luke Wilson. Not yet. How did he end up at this park, laying on the ground, counting minutes to his death as blood seeped into the earth? Well, it was a betrayal by his best friend. The gunman was meant to change hands for another crime, but instead been turned on him. Patrick McCann, the friend he trusted, had pulled the trigger not once, not twice, but 3 times. McCann's main job that day was to end the life of Wilson as revenge for a row between the two, where McCann had thrown insults at Wilson's uncles. It was only the fickle nature of fate, or perhaps the poor maintenance of a cheap handgun, that saved Luke's life. The weapon had jammed after the 3rd shot. McCann's attempted murder would later get him 20 years in prison. Going back to Luke's story, with a strength born of desperation, he managed to grasp the mobile phone his would-be assassin dropped in haste. His trembling fingers dialed 999, and as sirens wailed in the distance, he dragged his broken body towards a footbridge, leaving a trail of blood in his wake, only to be discovered by a jogger. As paramedics rushed to the scene, No one could have predicted that this brush with death would merely be the opening chapter in Luke Wilson's criminal career. The years following the shooting were a crucible for Luke Wilson. The physical scars were evident, the loss of one eye, impaired vision in the other, and a constant tremor in his right arm. Little did anyone know that 5 years later, this same young man would eagerly volunteer for a high-stakes assassination plot. The target? A member of the rival Hutch gang, and the backers? None other than the notorious Cartel. As Luke recovered, Dublin's underworld was shifting. The Hutch-Kinahan feud erupted, painting the city streets red with blood. By 2017, Luke Wilson was a man on a mission. At 22, he was still a small-time player, but his family name opened doors. His uncles cast long shadows in Dublin's criminal circles. Eric "Lucky" Wilson, rumoured to be one of Ireland's most prolific hitmen, now serving life in Spain for killing a British expat, and Keith Wilson, in prison for life for a 2010 murder of Daniel Gaynor, the dreaded fingerless gangland killer. Luke was consumed by the need to uphold the Wilson name, but it wasn't just family pride. A severe cocaine addiction and growing gambling debts put him in danger. With the pressure mounting, he knew he had to act fast to avoid becoming a cautionary tale. When Luke heard the Kinahan faction wanted someone to take out Gary Hanley, a known Hutch associate, he jumped at the chance, despite his limitations, eager for the money and respect. Unbeknownst to him, the Garda's new strategy using advanced surveillance was tracking his every move. As Luke prepared for the Hanley job, he was unaware of the tightening surveillance. Detectives recorded his desperate conversations, gathering evidence and waiting to strike, ensuring he had no escape when he faced the judge. The day of reckoning approached. As he made his way through Dublin streets in possession of a loaded handgun, with a silencer and 3 cans of petrol, his mind raced with a toxic mix of cocaine-fueled confidence and desperate ambition. Just as he approached the location where he planned to carry out the hit on Gary Hanley, the trap was sprung. In a flurry of activity, armed authorities swarmed around him. The would-be assassin found himself staring down the barrels of several guns, his own weapon rendered useless before he could even reach for it. As the handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists, the gravity of his situation began to sink in. In the following months, as Luke awaited trial, the full extent of the Garda's operation came to light. The aggressive tactics employed by the National Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau had paid off, landing on one of their biggest scalps in the ongoing battle to stem the tide of murders that engulfed the capital in 2016 and 2017. When Luke faced the judge in the Special Criminal Court for conspiracy to murder and firearm possession, his bravado was gone. The judge praised the operation and told Luke, "Had you fought this, you'd be facing 16 years. Consider yourself fortunate with 12. Luke gave a weak smile and muttered, "Thank you, Judge," before being led away to serve his sentence. While serving his time at Mountjoy prison officers observed him to be in particularly bad form. The weight of his actions and their consequences seemed to be pressing down on him, creating a powder keg of emotions ready to explode at the slightest provocation. That provocation came in the form of a simple instruction from a prison officer. It was late, and Wilson was spotted with a mop and bucket, apparently cleaning his cell. The officer, who knew Wilson well from his time on the landing, informed him it was too late for such activities. A reasonable request, one might think. But for Wilson, it was the spark that ignited his fury. "F*** off or I'll cut the throat of you," Wilson snarled at the officer, his words dripping with venom. But Wilson wasn't finished. As he was directed back to his cell, he continued his tirade, escalating his threats. "I can't get you in here," he spat, "but I can get you on the way home. I'll cut your throat." The menace in his voice was profound, turning a routine interaction into a chilling confrontation. The day wore on, and Wilson's behaviour only deteriorated. An incident with another officer led to the decision to move Wilson to a different cell. When 3 officers attempted to escort him, Wilson initially refused to comply. It was only when additional assistance was called that he finally cooperated. But even as he was being moved, Wilson's aggression reached new heights. In a moment of unbridled rage, he turned to the officer and uttered the words that would seal his fate. "If I don't get you, I'll get your kids and family. I will cut their throats." For the targeted officer, these were not empty threats. He later reported that Wilson's words were delivered with real venom, a level of aggression he had never before witnessed from the young convict. The officer's concern was justified. He knew of Wilson's connections in the criminal world and believed him capable of following through on his threats. In court, Wilson's defense painted a picture of a troubled young man, deeply affected by his past traumas and struggles with addiction. His lawyer, Bowman, emphasized that Wilson's behavior was deeply rooted in drug use. Indeed, at the time of his arrest for the assassination plot, Wilson and an accomplice had been recorded snorting cocaine, a chilling proof to the depth of his substance abuse issues. Bowman portrayed his client as remorseful, a man who uttered words he desperately wished he could take back. It was a reaction over which he felt he had little control at the time, he told the court, seeking understanding for Wilson's outburst. The defense also highlighted the personal toll of Wilson's original 12-year sentence. Bowman described it as crushing for his client, who realized he would miss much of his young son's childhood. The judge presiding over the case at Dublin Circuit Criminal Court acknowledged the genuine remorse expressed in a letter penned by Wilson. Nonetheless, she couldn't overlook the severity and persistence of his threats. The threat was issued with significant venom and extended to his family members as well. The means by which the threat would be executed was set out, Judge Greeley noted, underscoring the specific and frightening nature of Wilson's words. The judge also emphasized the importance of protecting prison officers, who perform a difficult and often dangerous job. Members of the prison service have to have confidence that something will be done, she stated, highlighting the need for consequences to such behavior. In her ruling, Judge Greeley sentenced Wilson to an additional 3.5 years in prison to be served consecutively to his existing 12-year term. In a small act of leniency, she suspended the final 18 months of this new sentence, subject to strict conditions. On a cold November night in 2019, Dublin's officers attached to the Garda National Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau embarked on a mission that would change the city's criminal landscape. Armed with crucial information, they raided a house in Woodford Grove, Clondalkin. Little did they know, their actions that night would mark a turning point in the fight against organised crime. After searching the main house, the officers discovered a small shed in the back of the garden. Guns were drawn as they observed movement inside. Armed Garda, armed police. The words sliced through the stillness of the night as the officers burst into the shed. Inside, they found two figures, sitting on a worn-out couch. One of them was Trevor Byrne, a notorious criminal with a chilling reputation. With guns pointed at the men, officers ordered them to surrender. But Byrne just sat there, motionless, looking at them. After 2 more warnings and no reaction, the weapons were holstered, and the men were pulled from the couch and brought to the ground. That night, Dublin witnessed a significant victory against organised crime, as they finally captured one of the Kinahan cartel's most feared gunmen. Just before Christmas 2020, Byrne was sent down for 9 years for firearm offences. In the shed, under the couch Byrne was sitting on, officers had discovered a loaded 9mm pistol. A DNA profile that was found on the gun matched with Byrne's. Byrne eventually pleaded guilty before the Special Criminal Court and claimed he had the weapon for protection because of a threat against his life. He claimed that this threat had forced him to flee the country years earlier, in 2016. Just months after the 9-year verdict, Trevor Byrne, who has over 40 criminal convictions, found himself in the hot seat. This time he faced charges stemming from a botched armed robbery at Boyle Sports, a local bookmaker in the heart of Applewood Village in Swords, County Dublin. After the 2010 robbery, he hijacked a woman's car at gunpoint and threatened to kill her. The non-jury court found him guilty after they determined that a mobile phone dropped at the scene during the robbery was Byrne's. In addition, he was recognized from CCTV footage. Byrne was jailed for a total of 17.5 years for the firearm offences and the armed robbery, but that was not the first time he had to face a lengthy prison sentence. In 2005, one of the many other chapters of Byrne's criminal escapades emerged as he got sentenced to 8 years. Back then, he orchestrated a brazen off-licence robbery, holding 10 Gardaí at gunpoint and hijacking a patrol car. He then managed to escape in a taxi after holding a gun to the taxi driver's head while being pursued by Gardaí. Just 4 months after his release from prison, in November 2009, he carried out the Swords robbery. Trevor Byrne's story is one of violence, betrayal, and audacious criminality that has left an indelible mark on the city. But his notoriety isn't merely the product of his trigger finger. He ran the lucrative drug trade in Finglas for the Kinahan Cartel, a role that earned him both respect and fear. Under the tutelage of Glen David Ward, better known as Mr. Flashy, would later become the main man in Finglas, taking over control in 2017. His gang, named the Gucci Gang, terrorized the Finglas area for years. Byrne found himself under intense scrutiny as a prime suspect in the 2014 shooting of John Gilligan, a crime kingpin who accused Byrne of orchestrating assassination attempts against him in both 2013 and 2014. The animosity between Byrne and Gilligan had deep roots, dating back to their time served together in Portlaoise prison, during which Byrne reportedly assaulted Gilligan. The assault is believed to have been ordered by Brian Latossa Meehan, who was angry over a media interview Gilligan had given. Despite Gilligan's firm belief that Byrne was responsible for at least one of the attacks, Byrne faced no charges related to the incidents. Gardaí suspect Trevor Byrne's deep involvement in the violent Kinahan-Hutch feud, a brutal chapter that shook the city to its core. His name surfaced in chilling gangland gun attacks, notably the ruthless murder of Eddie "Neddy" Hutch, one of Jerry the Monk Hutch's brothers, 3 days after the infamous Regency Hotel shooting in 2016. Neddy had just finished working as a taxi driver and came home around 7:45 p.m. As he got out of his taxi, a group of 4 men stepped out of a BMW and approached him. They fired several shots before chasing him inside and gunning him down. Neddy was shot up to 9 times before collapsing and dying in the hallway of his own house, while his unsuspecting wife was also at home. Byrne was arrested in May 2016 and questioned for several days at Mountjoy Garda Station. He was one of the first 9 people to be arrested in relation to the murder after quickly being identified as a suspect. However, he emerged unscathed, released without charges hanging over his head. Yet the whispers didn't die down. Rumours of his involvement continued to echo through Dublin's alleys. Sometime after his release, Byrne left the country and was believed to be hiding in the UK. However, just when Dublin thought it had seen the last of him, Byrne resurfaced on the city's streets. He had returned to Ireland shortly before his arrest in 2019. Years later, in April 2023, while serving the 17.5-year prison sentence at Mountjoy Prison, Byrne was arrested for Neddy Hutch's murder for the second time. He is suspected of being one of the gunmen. The case is still ongoing, but even incarceration couldn't contain Byrne's influence. Inside Mountjoy Prison, he reveled in his gangster reputation, forming alliances with fellow Kinahan Cartel inmates. A prison album of mob pictures, taken in the high-security jail, paints an online portrait of a man who remained unbroken, living the high life with his fellow inmates. The pictures show how Byrne is linked up with several Kinahan Cartel members behind bars while celebrating his 40th birthday. The inmates pictured include Kevin Gibson, Graham Gardner, Glenn Thompson, and Robert Brown. Gibson, a close friend of senior cartel member Liam Byrne, was jailed for 7 years for masterminding a €280,000 cocaine smuggling operation. Kinahan quartermaster Gardner is serving a 9-year sentence for possession of a cache of firearms during a Garda operation targeting the Kinahan gang in 2016. Investigators believed the weapons were to be used to target a close associate of Jerry the Monk Hutch. Thompson and Brown, a former British Army soldier, were each sentenced to 17.5 years and 11.5 years jail time respectively for possessing guns. Together with Thompson's brother Gary, they were caught in a van in an underground car park 250 meters from the home of the planned target, Patrick "Patsy" Hutch, another brother of the monk. Garda intelligence has linked Byrne to associates of the Kinahan Cartel based in Dublin for many years. Years back, the veteran gangster had to call on his cartel associates to protect him from notorious crime boss Eamon the Don Dunn. Byrne was a close associate of slain John Daly, a fingerless criminal with a large mouth and a nasty temper. Daly was shot in 2007 over fears he was trying to muscle in on the Don's North Dublin patch. It is claimed that Eamon Dunn, along with hitman Paddy Doyle and caged fat Freddie Thompson, paid €10,000 to have him killed. Dunn feared retribution for Daly's murder when Byrne was released from prison in December 2009. Dunn demanded Byrne to help set up another criminal named John Paul Joyce to prove his loyalty, but Byrne refused and sought the cartel's help instead, via then ally Gary Hutch. Hutch then reached out to Daniel Kinahan, and got his permission to bring Byrne to the Costa del Sol. Dunn went on to murder John Paul Joyce anyway, before his own elimination the following April. On a Friday night in 2008, Anthony Russell, a North Dublin career criminal, was enjoying drinks with friends at the Ardley Inn. Suddenly, two masked men entered the pub, causing immediate alarm. One of them opened fire, creating a scene of panic and chaos. Russell was targeted and shot multiple times in the upper body before the gunman fled in a silver Nissan Almera. The vehicle was later discovered in a laneway behind some houses on Maryfield Drive, just a stone's throw from the pub. Inside the car, authorities recovered a handgun. Despite being rushed to Beaumont Hospital, the father of two succumbed to his injuries an hour and a half later. Russell, who was set to marry the following month, had escaped a previous gun attack at his home 2 years prior, indicating a constant awareness of the danger surrounding his life. He was a member of the gang led by Christy Griffin, who had been sentenced to life in April 2007 for raping a young girl. This gang specialized in various illicit activities, including drug trafficking, armed robberies, and hijacking, often collaborating closely with the Provisional IRA. However, Griffin's involvement in the rape unleashed a chain reaction within his gang. The revelation stirred up tensions, leading to a schism and triggering a violent feud among criminals from the Sheriff Street area. This internal conflict quickly escalated, resulting in a spree of violence within the North Inner City. The aftermath was marked by numerous casualties, including multiple murders and grenade attacks. Following Russell's death, Gardaí conducted various searches and arrested over a dozen people. Shockingly, one of those questioned about the murder was only a teenager. It was 17-year-old Jason Buddha Molyneux, who would soon become known to Gardaí for his involvement in serious, unorganized crime. Buddha started his criminal career when he was just 13, initially getting into petty crime. However, by the time he was 17, he was a gun for hire, believed to have been part of the hit team behind the 2008 slaying of Anthony Russell. And that wasn't even the first time his involvement in a murder was suspected. 2 years earlier, when he was just 15, he was implicated to have been involved in a plot to kill another rival. On that occasion, wearing a bulletproof vest, he leapt out of a car and barged into the St. Mary's Mansions Flats complex. Gardaí suspected he had been sent in to search for targets during the ongoing feud in the north of the city. However, the 15-year-old, who was also a prolific joyrider back then, was shocked to run into two police officers, who eventually arrested him for driving a stolen motorbike. Buddha quickly gained notoriety as one of Dublin's most dangerous criminals, fueled by his obsession with weapons. With a staggering 120 criminal convictions under his belt, ranging from drug possession to knife offences and theft-related charges, he earned a reputation as an exceptionally violent individual. Despite never being formally charged in connection with Russell's murder, Buddha went on to become a prime suspect in 4 other Dublin gangland killings. These included the assassination of Mad Mickey Devoy in January 2014, the execution-style killing of Kinahan associate Michael Keogh in 2017, and the tragic double murder of Devoy's sister and an innocent friend that same year. Buddha maintained close ties with the Hutch family, particularly with Derek Coakley Hutch, who was the nephew of the monk. In 2016, Buddha was caught in possession of a stolen motorbike believed to be earmarked for use in a gangland hit against the Kinahan mob, who were deeply entrenched in a violent feud with the Hutch family. 2 years later, on January 20th, 2018, Derek became the 14th casualty of the enduring Kinahan-Hutch feud, which had plagued the country for years, resulting in the loss of 18 lives. Derek, a 27-year-old father of 2, arrived at the Bridgeview Halting site on the Clover Hill Road around 3 p.m. in a vehicle accompanied by 2 other men. As they exited the car, Derek remained inside when suddenly another vehicle pulled up alongside. At least 3 shots were fired at Derek from close range, striking him in the head and in the arm. Despite the swift arrival of emergency services, shortly after the alarm was raised, Derek was pronounced dead at the scene. His funeral was scheduled for the following week, with the wake being held on Buckingham Street Upper near his friend Buddha's home. Naturally, Buddha attended the wake, intending to carry the coffin of his slain friend during the funeral. Little did he realize, he would be next in line. After attending the wake, Buddha returned home where he lived with his mother and sister. However, around 8:45 p.m. Buddha left, saying he was meeting a friend at nearby James Larkin House. Moments later, a Renault Kangoo van approached, carrying a 2-man hit team. Buddha was shot up to 13 times at close range, just a short distance from his house. Despite being officially warned by the Gardaí, Buddha was not wearing his bulletproof vest at the time of the attack. His mother disclosed that he had refrained from going out earlier in the day due to concerns about people watching their home and keeping track of his movements. Later, when attempts to reach her son went unanswered, Miss Molyneux got worried and left the house to go and look for him. As she prepared to leave, she heard a loud bang. Hastening to put on her boots, she moved out to the balcony and saw about 4 flashes coming from the James Larkin flats. In a moment of defiance, she shouted at the suspected gunman, labeling them a dirty scumbag before rushing to her injured son's side. Upon reaching Buddha, she asked him who had shot him, but he remained silent. He was rushed to Mayo Hospital, where he was pronounced dead shortly thereafter. The gun responsible for Buddha's demise, a Swiss-made Sphinx handgun seldom seen in Ireland, was later found inside the partially burnt-out Renault. The fact that Buddha was gunned down when there was such a heavy guard of presence ahead of the funeral of his friend Derek Hutch proves how his killers were willing to take chances in order to take him out. Buddha found himself in the crosshairs of the Kinahan-Hutch feud due to his association with the Hutch family. Following Derek's assassination, even while out on bail, Buddha arranged a war council meeting among Hutch gang members at a pub in the north inner city. However, Gardaí suspected that another long-standing feud, predating the Kinahan-Hutch conflict, might have been the catalyst for Buddha's murder. Speculation suggested that he had been marked for death upon his release from prison, with various rival gangs seeking retribution. Gardaí had issued multiple warnings to Buddha about the imminent threat to his life, indicating the seriousness of the situation. The leading theory behind the motive for Buddha's murder suggests it may be linked to his connections with individuals suspected of trying to murder criminal Derek Boteler Devoy. Tragically, instead of Devoy, his innocent sister Antoinette Corbally Devoy and pal Clinton Shannon, also innocent, were shot dead when 2 gunmen stormed through the mother of 6's house in Ballymun in August 2017. 3 years prior to this double murder, Buddha is believed to have been the gunman who fatally shot Boteler's brother Michael, Mad Mickey Devoy. Michael was gunned down shortly after his release from a brief prison sentence. It's suspected that Buddha's killing might have been an act of revenge for Michael's murder. Michael was the chief suspect for shooting at a group of people leaving a party at a Dublin pub in 2013. Nobody died in that shooting, but Kinahan drug dealer Greg Lynch suffered a head wound and 3 bystanders were injured. Lynch initially blamed Boteler Devoy for the attack, and while Michael Devoy's murder remains unsolved, Gardaí believe criminals linked to the Kinahan-Hutch feud killed him in revenge for shooting one of their number. Despite being a suspect in Michael's killing and undergoing questioning by the Garda, Buddha was released without charge and never faced prosecution in connection to the murder. Nonetheless, Devoy's Ballymun-based associates kept Buddha responsible for his death, leading Gardaí to explore the possibility of Buddha being targeted by this faction. After thorough investigation, Gardaí ultimately concluded that Buddha fell victim to a coordinated effort involving multiple individuals working in collaboration with the gunman. Several arrests were made in connection to the investigation, but to this day, no one has ever been charged in relation to Buddha's death. On a bitterly cold and rainy night in early December 2016, Glen Clarke sat quietly in a stolen car, its license plates cleverly altered, nestled within the peaceful Riverdale housing estate in Dublin. It had been 3.5 months since he had killed his last victim on the Spanish island of Mallorca. Methodically, he put on a pair of gloves and pulled a sleek black revolver from the car's glove box. He was preparing for another hit on behalf of the Kinahan cartel. As he began cleaning the gun, he peered down the barrel. A sudden deafening bang shattered the tranquility of the dark housing estate. The gun fell to the floor, and the 26-year-old contract killer slumped over the steering wheel. He had just shot himself directly in the head and died instantly. Unfortunately, this was not the first time he unintentionally killed someone. In the shadowy world of contract killings, precision is everything. Glen Clarke, with his scruffy appearance and a tendency to shoot first and ask questions later, was the antithesis of what one might expect from a professional hitman. His ill-fated career began with a bang, quite literally, as he embarked on his first mission in the Clondalkin neighborhood. On a fateful Saturday in August 2013, shortly after midnight, Clarke's target was supposed to be James Nelly Walsh, a man with a rap sheet as long as the River Liffey itself. But Glen, in his inexplicable ineptitude, had managed to mix up the names and faces in the worst way possible. Instead of Walsh, he found himself staring down the barrel at 21-year-old Dean Johnson. 8 deafening gunshots echoed through the desolate alley, and Johnson fell to the ground, just a couple of yards from his home. He was rushed to Tala Hospital, but later pronounced dead. Johnson was known to Gardaí, but was not considered to be involved in major criminality, nor did he have ties to organized crime.
Gardaí are trying to piece together the final movements of a man shot repeatedly in the head as he lay dying on the ground in the murder of Dean Johnson in the early hours of Saturday morning. Say they're shocked at the level of violence used.
News of the disastrous hit spread like wildfire through tight-knit criminal circles. The word on the street was that Glen Clarke was the worst hitman in the history of Irish organised crime, and his notoriety only grew with each subsequent blunder. However, time would tell that the Kinahan organisation wasn't too worried about this dubious reputation. At the time of Johnson's killing, Glen was working for a subcell of the Kinahan Cartel, which was run by Peter Keating, Clarke's personal friend. Keating was locked in a vicious feud with gangster James Nellie Walsh. Later, Keating received an 11 years jail sentence for his role in the botched murder plot of James Mago Gately. Although Clarke is suspected of being one of the 2 actual gunmen, there were others involved in the planning of the Johnson murder, all with connections to the Kinahan cartel. A total of 10 people have been arrested, but no one has ever been brought before the courts. Clarke was never charged either, and by 2016 he was ready to strike again. This time the target was Keith Murtaugh, a senior member of the Hutch gang. On a sunny spring afternoon in the Sheriff Street area, Murtaugh was having a pint at Nocta's pub, completely unaware of the danger that lured. At the same time, Glen Clarke was making his way to the pub on his pushbike, knowing that Murtaugh was a sitting duck. As Glen slowly pedalled up to the crowded pub, he pulled the brakes, lost control of the bike, and stumbled to the ground. Angry and embarrassed, he got back on his feet and pulled a gun out of his pocket. However, shouts of the gathered crowd alerted his target, and Murtaugh fled in total panic. A chase ensued as Clarke recklessly fired shot after shot into the distance. While Murtaugh was running for his life, another man made his way towards Sheriff Street, 24-year-old Martin O'Rourke. O'Rourke was a troubled man, fighting a heroin addiction and about to become a father of his 4th child. As he crossed the junction, another shot was fired, and O'Rourke was hit by a stray bullet. The unfortunate bystander crumpled to the ground, his life snuffed out in an instant. The aftermath of the shooting was nothing short of pandemonium. The Sheriff Street community was devastated. Glen's ineptitude had resulted in the death of an innocent man and chaos on the streets of Dublin. It was a miracle that more bystanders hadn't been killed that day, as it later turned out that Clarke had fired 13 rounds of ammunition. Martin O'Rourke had no connection with the ongoing Kinahan-Hutch feud. Many hoped that his murder would be the last one, but unfortunately, that was not the case. 4 months later, Glen Clarke was sent to Mallorca on what should have been a straightforward assignment: eliminate Jonathan Hutch in retaliation for the Regency Hotel shooting. Hutch was enjoying a family holiday at their regular holiday spot in Mallorca when he was spotted by a Kinahan associate. The cartel did not hesitate, but immediately flew Clarke out to the island. On the evening of August the 17th, the Hutches bumped into another Irish family. Together with his wife and 3 kids, council worker Trevor O'Neill stayed at the same holiday complex. Trevor and Jonathan, who did not know each other, had crossed paths earlier that day, striking up a chat while enjoying a poolside afternoon. Later that evening, the 2 families ran into each other on a busy road near the complex. Together, they made their way back to the hotel. Meanwhile, Clarke had tracked down Hutch and was following him closely. As he crept up to them, he pulled his gun and reached over the shoulder of one of Trevor's kids to shoot at Hutch. However, Hutch was onto him and managed to escape. Clarke, in a fit of rage, turned to the first person he saw and recklessly fired 4 shots. Trevor O'Neill was hit in his lower back and died before the eyes of his wife and children. O'Neill was never involved in organized crime. He just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. It was during his 4th and final assignment that Glen Clarke's infamy reached its absurd pinnacle. It is believed that his target was Noel Duckhead Kirwan. Kirwan had no ties to the criminal underworld, but had been standing next to Jerry Hutch at Neddy Hutch's funeral in March earlier that year. This sparked the cartel's paranoid suspicions of him being connected to Jerry Hutch and made him a target during the Kinahan-Hutch feud. Just 3 months after the fatal mistake shooting on Mallorca, Clarke was now preparing for this new hit as he sat in a stolen car. But fate had a cruel sense of humor that evening. As Clarke was cleaning his loaded gun, he peered down the barrel. Disaster struck in the most bizarre fashion imaginable. In a dark twist of fate, he accidentally pulled the trigger, sending a bullet directly into his own eye. The scene that unfolded in that stolen car defied belief. Blood spattered the interior, and Glen's lifeless body slumped over the steering wheel. He had managed to murder 3 innocent men and accidentally murder himself in a career that could only be described as tragically comical. The fact that Glen Clarke had been allowed to shoot 3 innocent people highlights how little regard the Kinahans have for human life. 3 hits, 3 innocent lives lost, and Glen's reputation as the worst hitman in Irish history was cemented. Yet he remained inexplicably on the payroll of the criminal organization that employed him, perhaps out of morbid curiosity or sheer amusement at his continued blunders. As the years passed, his legend grew, and his story was retold with a mixture of horror and morbid fascination. Glen Clarke, the bumbling hitman who couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, had etched his name into the annals of infamy in a way that no one could have ever predicted. It was a tale that would be told for generations. A grim reminder that in the world of crime, sometimes the most dangerous weapon of all is sheer incompetence. On September 2nd, 2016, just a month after Jonathan Hutch was targeted in Mallorca, his father, John, the older brother of Jerry the Monk Hutch, and his wife Vera returned home to Drummerley Avenue, Dublin, after picking up their daughter who was visiting. As they parked their car behind the house, a speeding Opel Astra suddenly screeched to a halt nearby. A hitman swiftly emerged brandishing 2 guns and sprinted towards John's car. In a panic, John managed to dash into his backyard and close the gate behind him. The hitman, dropping one of his guns, reached the gate with the remaining revolver in hand, firing multiple rounds over a wall and into the garden before retrieving the fallen weapon and making a hasty escape. The stolen Opel Astra used in the attack was later discovered burnt out, highlighting the premeditated nature of the assault. The hitman had meticulously tracked John's movements for days, planting a tracker under his Nissan. Fortunately, John Hutch narrowly escaped with his life, but the traumatic incident left a deep impact, especially on his daughter, who witnessed the entire ordeal, marking a profoundly distressing period for the entire Hutch family. John Hutch might not have been a widely recognized name, as he had no criminal involvement. However, he found himself in the crosshairs due to being Jerry Hutch's brother, enduring at least one assassination attempt relating to the Kinahan-Hutch feud. Tragically, he suffered the loss of another brother and 2 nephews to the ongoing violence. During the Regency Hotel incident, a number of cars were used as a getaway from the scene, and John Hutch was blamed by the Kinahans for being one of the drivers. However, despite this accusation, John's name was never mentioned during the Regency Hotel trial. No evidence, such as CCTV footage, was ever presented to link him to the getaway cars. Nevertheless, he became a prime target for the Kinahans, as the Regency shooting triggered a relentless manhunt against his family. In May 2016, John's son Garrett was fatally shot near his car outside the Avondale House Flats on North Cumberland Street. Just 3 months later, another tragedy struck, when John's other son, Jonathan, narrowly escaped an attempt on his life in Mallorca. The Hutch family were grieving for Gareth, and Jonathan Hutch booked a family holiday to Mallorca to take a break. Unaware of the presence of the Kinahan-affiliated Byrne organized crime group in Mallorca, Jonathan was targeted by hitman Glen Clarke, sent by the Cartel. Fortunately, Jonathan evaded the assassin, but an innocent council worker, Trevor O'Neill, tragically lost his life in a case of mistaken identity. These events marked a harrowing period for the Hutch family, marred by grief and constant danger. At the same time, Michael Carroll, a notorious petrol station robber, was making relentless efforts to become part of the Kinahan cartel. These coincided perfectly with the cartel's aggressive campaign to wipe out the entire Hutch family. Carroll, characterized by his dangerous and chaotic nature, struggled with a severe drug addiction, making him an ideal recruit for the cartel. He was a ruthless gunman known for causing trouble in the city center, accumulating almost 60 convictions, including 6 robbery and 3 theft charges, as well as drug-related offenses and possession of knives. He had spent several periods of time behind bars and harbored ambitions of making it big in his city. Seeing the lavish lifestyles of figures like the Kinahans and the Byrnes, he desired access to that world and aspired to become a Kinahan soldier. He also happened to owe a substantial drug debt to the Kinahan Cartel, holding him responsible for the loss of 3 drug stashes in the South Inner City area. During this period, he was involved in numerous robberies and had connections with individuals like Fat Freddie Thompson and Liam Byrne. Following the setback with the drug stashes, Carroll offered the cartel to settle his debt by becoming a hired gun. The senior figures in the Kinahan Cartel preferred delegating the dirty work and staying hands-off, demanding blind loyalty in return. Under the direction of Fat Freddie Thompson, a high-ranking Kinahan member who would later receive a life sentence, Carroll had to be willing to perpetrate acts of violence against specific targets, including John Hutch. This led to his targeting of Hutch at his home on Drummerley Road in September 2016. 6 months later, during the height of the intense Kinahan-Hutch feud, Carroll made an attempt on the life of Edward Staunton, another Hutch relative, in a hit-and-run incident. Despite being slain Gary Hutch's cousin, Staunton was not believed to be involved in criminal activities. Carroll, in a single night, tried to assassinate Staunton twice, and these attempts were suspected to be funded by the Kinahan Cartel as part of the feud. The usual individuals the cartel relied on for such attacks were absent, having fled the country, been incarcerated, or fallen under suspicion. Consequently, the cartel began recruiting individuals like the extremely violent Carroll, who were not central to the organization. Seeking retaliation for David Byrne's murder at the Regency Hotel, the Kinahan Cartel aimed to show they were prepared to kill innocent friends and members of the Hutch family. Around 9:35 p.m. one Sunday night in 2017, Eddie Staunton was cycling along James Joyce Street when he was struck by a silver Ford Focus driven by Michael Carroll. Having just visited a friend, Staunton had already grown suspicious of the Ford. After the collision, the injured 25-year-old fled to Railway Street on foot. Carroll parked his car and pursued Staunton. Roughly 15 minutes later, as Staunton lay on the ground receiving assistance from locals, Carroll approached him and fired 4 shots, hitting Staunton's body twice. Staunton was taken to Mater University Hospital and survived the hit. The gunshot wounds he sustained, luckily, were not life-threatening. Disturbing CCTV footage capturing the attempted murder surfaced. Following the attack, Carroll fled to the UK, but he was eventually extradited to Ireland last year to face charges for attempting to murder both John Hutch and Eddie Staunton. Carroll's decision to join the Kinahan Cartel ranks has come back to haunt him, resulting in a recent 22-year prison sentence. Carroll admitted guilt for attempting to kill Staunton on Railway Street on March 26, 2017. Regarding the Hutch case, extensive CCTV footage was recovered, featuring a man matching Carroll's description. Initially, he was caught on camera carrying a bag while leaving School Street Flats, before getting into an Opel Astra. This vehicle was later seen entering Drummerley Road at 5:20 p.m. on September 2nd, near the entrance to John Hutch's house. After the shooting, surveillance footage captured Carroll fleeing towards Phoenix Park, where he changed his clothes. He eventually returned to School Street Flats, where he was observed on CCTV, crawling towards the door of a flat. While Carroll was initially charged with the attempted murder of John Hutch, he instead pleaded guilty to a new charge of possessing a firearm with intent to endanger life, receiving a sentence of 10 years and 6 months. Combined with an 11.5-year sentence for the Staunton attack, Carroll is now serving a total sentence of 22 years. 3 years after surviving Carroll's attack, John Hutch tragically met his end when he fell down the stairs at his home. On the day of his death, he went out in the afternoon for a few drinks. Later, his wife brought him back to their house. Then, she heard a thump. The grandfather, who was under constant threat, suddenly collapsed, suffering a severe head injury from the fall. Armed Gardaí who were stationed nearby arrived swiftly, performing CPR before rushing Hutch to the hospital. 2 days later, he passed away due to his massive head injuries. In the last years of his life, John Hutch lived in perpetual fear, mourning the loss of his family members who had been brutally murdered. The stress of being targeted by the bloodthirsty Kinahan Cartel had taken its toll. He abandoned his job as a taxi driver due to the feud, and rarely left his heavily fortified home. Living under the constant threat of a global billion-euro drug cartel out to kill him must have been unimaginably harrowing. His family and associates firmly believed that his death was a direct consequence of Daniel Kinahan and the Kinahan organization's relentless pursuit. That was it for today's video. What are your thoughts on today's topic? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel if you'd like to see our next videos.